African in the world. The black man is capable of managing the whole world.
Welcome to the African Experience Podcast, your podcast for fascinating discussions, stories, and interviews from the diaspora. Your hosts, two ordinary Africans.
Hello, fellas. Welcome to episode 3 of the African Experience Podcast. I'm your host, Yakubu Ali, with my colleague,
Abdul Hafiz.
Welcome back. How are you doing, Abdul Hafiz? How is life during the corona pandemic?
Life's good, man. Life's good. I am out in the morning. I have my coffee. I'm trying to take in the freshness of the environment. The world is changing, so we will have to change with it, I guess.
Good for you. I just hope it brings something more positive to us. It will change the world in a more positive way.
I mean,
than
if
it used to be.
If it doesn't, I mean, positive is what we make of it, right?
Yes.
Positive is what we make of the world. If we can see the silver linings, although we know this unfortunate pandemic has created a lot of economical, psychological, some people, even spiritual problems, we still will have to adjust, right?
Exactly.
How about you? How is your day going, man?
Yeah, we are also doing good. We are trying to use our time and days wisely. So, fellas, welcome back again. Today we have a very exciting topic, and we hope we can talk about it in a much educative way. It's the Africans in the diaspora. We are going to talk about their lives, about the journey, about their contribution amongst themselves and towards the African continent. So, Abdul Hafiz, whenever you hear the word diaspora, what comes to your mind? Not the African diaspora, but the word diaspora, roughly, what comes to your mind?
Interesting. That's an interesting question, right? So diaspora is basically, I mean, I'm just going to go by the literal definition.
Yes.
It's basically people living outside their own, or people living outside their geography of origin, if that makes sense. So I don't know when the word diaspora was coined, but for example, the Jews.
Yes.
They are probably one ethnic group that you can say have been in the diaspora for a very long time. They've been outside where they actually are from, right? So the word diaspora, it relates to people who are living outside their geography of origin.
I see.
So that's what comes to mind.
Can we also say like it's the dispersion of people, and not just people, but their language, their culture, from where they used to concentrate, they scatter or displaced to live in a separate area.
Absolutely. I mean, if we're going to even go as far as however long we can go back, so we can actually even say the world is an African diaspora, right?
Yes.
So considering the fact that
humanity started
in Africa, so to speak, people will say, so that would make the whole world an African diaspora. But yeah, we'll have to narrow it down to the recent world, the one we know about.
So how do you feel if someone says African or Black diaspora?
How do I feel in what sense?
Like, how do you define that?
African diaspora. So the African diaspora it started a very long time ago. So African diasporas now, people outside their geographical origin. So people right now outside the continent of Africa should be considered or are the African diaspora, right? So I'd say it's the community of Africans who are in the United States, in Brazil, in Haiti. So even Africans in the Arab continent, Arabian Peninsula. African diaspora is all these people, so consisting of people since from the times of slavery and until today.
So we can put it in this way, like it's a very historic movement of Africans and their descendants to various parts of the world. Absolutely. Which of course we can make a very strong argument. It was fueled by the
transatlantic
slave trade, and we also see through that the dispersal of Africans, and America has the largest number of Africans, not forgetting Europe, Middle East, among other places.
Yeah.
And also we can also talk about after the Second World War, where the Europeans destroyed themselves. And I can remember the British invited people from the Commonwealth country to come and build their nation that was bombed by their German cousins.
Yeah.
So we can also say that also play a part or a role in 100%. The creation of the African diaspora, right?
100%. So being diasporans, people migrate from a certain place to another place for different reasons.
Yeah.
Not only slavery, even though unfortunately a majority of the diasporans are the result of cruel to humanity. Of slavery, that is. And the slavery we're talking about is not just the transatlantic slave trade. Way before the transatlantic slave trade, we had the Arab slave trade.
Yeah, and most of the time we kind of miss that, right?
Exactly. So the diaspora starts way from there. That's what we're talking about. It's a very, very long. It's a movement that's started a very long time ago. It's just that the word diaspora has been recently coined and continued.
Yeah, and we talked about culture. When you look at the kind of African diaspora, the community we have outside the African continent, do you see a connection, a kind of relation between the cultures that people have? Let's say people in America, the cultures they display is a kind of a replica of a culture in Africa, or it's totally different, and what might influence the differences to you?
This is putting it too simplistic to say that American culture, or to say how is American culture closer to African culture.
Or those living in Brazil, for instance.
Brazil, yes. So, having in mind the fact that these people, or these are brothers and sisters who have left the continent for about how many years now? 500 years now, probably. It's bound to change over time, but what we are missing here, the point we're missing here is the African culture. What do you mean by African culture?
It needs a definition, right?
Yes, because Africa is probably is the continent probably with the most diverse kinds of people. We have a lot of ethnic groups. We have different tribes, we have clans, we have different cultures. So, for example, just to take an example, in Ghana, what is the Ghanaian culture? You see, if you talk about Ghanaian culture, are you talking about the Asante culture, or are you talking about the Ewe,
Dogomba or the Ewe,
exactly,
or the Fanti?
Exactly. What would you take to say is the Ghanaian culture? So, extrapolating that to the African continent is a very simplistic way of putting it. But the African Americans which we think are the most dominant, actually is the Brazil. The most populated Africans outside the continent is in Brazil. About, I think, around, are they 100 million people in Africans in Brazil?
I think they said they are the populated Africans in the
outside the continent, right?
Outside the continent, yes.
Yeah. So if you go to Brazil now, the Africans in Brazil, or the African Brazilians, they have their own culture. This culture is a culture that has been mixed with slavery. It's a culture that's mixed with the ancestors from Africa. It's a culture that is mixed with the Latin history, the Spanish, Portuguese, Italians. So they have a wide mixed kind of culture.
Yes.
Same as the Americans.
Yes.
People create culture when they're together, right? So if you take the slavery, for example, the black slaves had to live together, had to create a community. So they didn't necessarily hold on to every single cultural norms they had in Africa. They had to create their own. So they have their own culture, which has roots in Africa, but that doesn't necessarily mean it
has to be the same.
Or it has to be the same.
Yes. So what connects us? Because culture is practically a very, very important element when it comes to bringing people together. What do you think connects Africans outside the continent and those on the continent? Is it history, which includes culture as well, language, or what? Is it the color of our skin, or what?
Obviously, the most apparent one is the color of the skin. And you see, the thing about the color of our skin is it's tricky when it comes to connection. So if you go to the Indian subcontinent, if you go to the southern part of India, if you go to Papua New Guinea, right, you can find Africans, black people with the melanated skin, black skin. Would you say they're the same people as Africans? I'd say no. Because the color of the skin is the same as Africans and as some Americans or Black Americans in this sense, or African American, whichever word you'd like to use. This does not only connect us. Color of the skin is important, as well as history. So, for example, with the African Americans, we have a direct history to African Americans. We were parted. We used to be together. We were parted. That is why when they're coming back, we see them as brothers and sisters coming back, right? So there are a lot of things that connect us. Culture, skin color. Now, especially if you talk about the diasporans in Britain and in America, language. So, say for example, an American would probably be easily integrated in the culture of an English-speaking African country. That would be the case. And a diasporan in France would probably easily integrated in a French-speaking country. So,
what can you say to someone who says, regardless of where we find ourselves, regardless of the changes we see within cultures and languages, as Africans who, through some horrific historic sequence, we were separated, we still have common destiny. So a success of an African in America or in Brazil or in China or in Japan can be equated to the success of Africans on the continent. And that idea might have led to the creation of the Pan-Africanist movement, which I think is very active in the Africans in the diaspora.
Okay. So can you phrase the question exactly?
Like, there is no way we can, even though we live in a different geography, but a lot of people didn't choose willingly to leave the African continent.
Yeah, okay.
They were took outside the continent. So no matter what we do, our destiny is connected.
Yeah.
And the suffering of Africans in Brazil, as I said, in other countries, can be equated to the suffering of Africans on the continent. Or is there any disparities between or difference between these people? Because, okay, those who are living on the African continent are experiencing different kind of exploitation, but those who are living in America are also experiencing different kind of, the end game is the same.
It's hard to say. It's hard to say because
at the end of the day, we are living in the capitalist world.
Yeah, we live in the capitalist world, but you can also say people in China are not necessarily living in the capitalist world. So
and we have Africans over there.
Yeah. So you can't, just because we are Africans, right? Or we have the same origin, that doesn't mean we have the same suffering. Because saying the same, talking about same suffering, I'm talking practically. So, for example, even in Africa, the kind of suffering or the kind of struggles that individual Africans are going through are different. So, trying to compare it to other Africans or other African origins in the diaspora would be, again, simplistic, right? We can only listen to each other. We can only sympathize with each other. We can only find ways to help each other get out of that suffering. But you can't necessarily feel exactly what an African who was born in Britain feels.
Yes. Yeah.
You as an African, or you can't say you know the plight of an African American.
For instance, on the issue of racism,
yes,
it's difficult for an African who has lived his whole life on the African continent to understand the
exact racism in America,
the pain and the psychological effect it has on people living outside the African continent. Yes, we have discrimination amongst ourselves on the continent, but when it comes to the issue of racism, it's difficult for an African who hasn't left the continent to understand.
I'd say so. Yes, I'll agree with you 100%. So pretending to understand the plight of African Americans would be hypocritical in my opinion, because as an African growing up in Africa, you never ever actually thought of somebody as different in terms of race. That wasn't a day-to-day problem of or that isn't a day-to-day problem.
Even though there's a subtle preference towards the whites or fair colored
that's a colorism problem. That's a colorism problem. When we come to that colorism, that's a whole different issue. But what I'm talking about now is, for example, African Americans would face other things like simple stare because of the color of their skin.
Exactly.
Going to look for jobs because of their names, right?
Yes.
In Africa, we have problems of our own, but it's not necessarily a racial problem. It's a colorism problem.
Can you also say the same to the other side, like those living outside who were born and raised not on the continent, most of the time do not understand the exact mind of the people, African people on the continent, and sometimes to the way they behave towards the people on the continent might be misjudged or not rightly justified.
Yeah, of course, because it's a result of a long process of educating people in a different way. So we talked about education in our previous episode and how we aren't educated the right way. So if you come to somebody in America, this person or somebody outside the African continent, throughout their whole life, it's just recently that things have changed. Otherwise, throughout the whole life, the African continent was depicted as this foreign entity, this people who living with animals, and you know the way we've been portrayed outside the continent. So, and we're more like uneducated people and all these things. So if an American grew up, or if a person born in Britain or anywhere in the West or even in the East grew up seeing pictures of this kind, they will have a perception. You can't blame them for having that perception.
Exactly.
You can only blame them for not actually looking for the truth. That's the only way that's the only blame you can put on them. Same as how we Africans, we look at African Americans or people outside the continent in one picture. For example, if it comes to the African Americans, we look at them as just rappers, musicians, or people with certain swag, style, different from us, who have lost. Honestly, we thought about this. That's what we've been told. They've lost their ways. They're all gangsters, because that was what media was portraying them to us. So it goes both ways. That is why we need to come together in so many ways to reconcile these kind of differences and see how we can move from there.
Yes, but what is the difference between living in, say, a country like America as an African, or Britain, in Europe in general, even though there are differences between Eastern Europe and Western Europe? What are the differences between living in these countries and living in a country like Turkey or the Arab countries?
Yeah.
The level of racism and the kind of coveted it is. Like, you don't openly see things like this in some countries, or racism in some countries, but in some countries it's very, very apparent. You see it, but it doesn't mean that the racism doesn't exist. What is the difference between those countries?
Interesting. Very important that you touched on people living in this part of the world. So people living in this part of the world, when people start talking about the African diaspora,
you mean Turkey?
Turkey, Eastern Europe, Middle East, right? People do not necessarily think about Africans who live in this part of the world. It's a very important thing we need to notice, but because that is why I think this podcast is important. This podcast creates a different perspective, right? It shows the perspective of Africans, or that's what we're trying to show. Africans here in this part of the world face different type of struggle to Africans, say, in the Americas or Africans in China. But I would not be in the right place to talk about the struggles of, or the racism, as you put it, in people in a friend in Belgium, or a friend in Spain, or a brother in America, or a brother in China. I can only talk about people here. So the difference, the only similarity is that we are being, the first thing people think about when they look at you is you're different. I think that goes all across the board. It's the physical appearance. That's something we cannot do without. So the person would see you, all of a sudden would have, depending, positive or negative prejudgment of you. So the person would have to take the time to know you better. Depending on the person, you can have amazing experiences. So a person in Belgium, a person in France, in England, a person in China, they will all have faced different. And one more thing that adds to this positive or negative experience is the education or the culture, the world culture education of the people in that country. So, for example, a white person in Western Europe would probably be more open to a non-African in the eastern part. The reason is Africans or blacks and the western part of the world have been in contact for a very long time, and they've known each other for a very long time. But you and me would know the kind of experience or the different kind of discrimination faced by Africans or blacks in this part of the world. They're not the same. So
even though it exists, but it's very, very subtle.
Very subtle, or maybe even unconsciously. So the people here might actually not know what they're doing is racism, right? Or is discrimination. So this is a different kind of experience we face, an African here.
But this kind of denial, whenever you point to a person like, okay, what you are doing is not right, and it's racism, or it might lead to racism. There's this kind of denial, especially in this part of the world or the Arab world, like, no, we can't be racist. We are different from the Europeans. We are different from Americans. Even though we know when you read history, there were Africans who were brought to this part of the world through slavery. That is undeniable truth. So what do you think prompts that sudden denial and the need to distance yourself from it, even if the one who is experiencing it is trying to make you see like, man, this is racism?
I think what prompts that denial is it's rather unfortunate that racism has been defined as a Western person, or it's a Western white
phenomenon.
man. Yeah, that's trying to oppress a black or an African person. Here, for example, when they talk about racism, they point to the transatlantic slave trade. So they don't see what they're doing as racism sometimes, because they think they can be racist. For example, the person would say, "No, I'm just curious. I'm just. You're different from me." But that's exactly what we're trying to point out to you, right? We're trying to point out to you, I'm not different from you. In the sense of a person, just that I'm a different color of skin. They see only what they see on the media as this is racism. So racism is a Western person oppressing a black African or an African American or whatever the person's color is. But for us, ours is curiosity and and we can't be racist because we accept everybody. I think everybody says the same thing. It's just that the experience is a bit different.
Yeah,
we have to be careful. We have to be careful when we are trying to put everybody in the same basket, because we don't want that done to us, right? Yeah, so very important.
Okay, we shouldn't make racism the topic of
actually that was
our discussion. It's part of the problem we are experiencing.
We digress.
Outside the country, there are a lot of other problems, like the lack of or the ineducatability to bring Africans together is also another problem. But do you think this kind of alienation that we feel, the kind of staring, the kind of racism we experience outside Africa, kind of push us to learning more about ourselves as Africans and being conscious of the world around us and trying to make things better?
Yeah, I think if the reason why an African, when we were in Africa, or when you're brought up in Africa, you don't necessarily think about the color of your skin, or you don't necessarily think about who you are in
your history, right?
In a deeper sense, yeah, because nobody has looked at you differently. Nobody has looked at you differently to prompt that curiosity. Why am I being looked at differently? Why am I why do people react to me in a certain way? No, because say, for example, whenever I go back home and I am walking around, I look at people less and less, because I can't see anybody staring at me.
Yes.
It's like psychologically, I am stress-free.
You feel released.
Absolutely. But when I am here, you're wondering, if somebody is giggling, you're wondering, why are they giggling?
Yes.
Is it, they might not be giggling because of you or laughing at you, but because of the way you're thinking.
And the environment you
find yourself. So this will prompt you to look at who you are, get deeper into where you are, where you're from, and that will create that education we talked about last episode, right? So without actually digressing into this racial and racism and whatever color of the skin type of thing, we need to find a way to connect to other diasporans, which is our topic today. We need to find a way to find the similarities. How can we come together rather than think about how other people are thinking of us?
On that note, I'm going to ask you like a very general and open question.
Okay.
Do you think Africans in the diaspora can one day come together? As we know, this kind of thinking and thought was very, very prevalent before the independence of the African countries, where some group of Africans in the diaspora came together to form the Pan-Africanism.
Yeah.
The movement. Some say is a political doctrine as well as a movement, which has the aim of unifying and uplifting African nations and the African diaspora as a universal community. Do you think this idea of Pan-Africanism is still in existence, that the youth in the 21st century, 2020, still understand the importance of coming together to change the destiny of Africa?
After, like you said before, the independence of Africa, it had already started, right? So that is to show that we've been aware of coming, the importance of coming together. So we've had, like you've said, a lot of Africans outside the continent try to create this political movement, whatever you can call it, the Pan-Africanism. So people outside Africa have tried that people in the continent have tried that. We can have people like Marcus Garvey, W.E.B. Du Bois, Kwame Nkrumah. People like these people have tried to create a certain political movement, so to speak, since those days. That is to show we know coming together will be the best option we have. But people in the 21st century, in 2020 today, I feel like we've had a different calling. We've a different mindset these days. So there's a certain awakening that has come with African Americans or Africans in the diaspora coming back. It's to do with a whole different factors. Some of the factors are simple as we don't feel at home. We still don't feel at home after these years. We still don't feel at home. So, or maybe we can do better in the African continent, or maybe there are more opportunities in the African continent, or I am trying to know who I am. So going back to the continent is the best way to find out who I am. So there's a realization that's positive in many ways. And this is not to say anybody who does not want to come back. So because it's natural. If you go back 3 or 4 generations of their family, they were all Americans. They were all born in the United States or in Britain. So it's only natural for them to feel that they don't have to come back.
And the kind of education they get also compounds their fear of not even stepping their foot on the continent.
Yeah.
Because a lot of them are afraid. You don't know what Africa is, how the people are, and you feel a kind of in the middle. In America, you feel alienated. When you come back to Africa, you don't know your place, so you are in the middle.
Absolutely.
So someone might say, okay, I don't care, let me just live my life.
And look, it's up to the person. So for example, you can find a lot of videos on YouTube or articles or blogs of African Americans talking about, no, they're not Africans, or they're not African Americans, they're just Americans. I mean, to the person, man, you can't impose what you think you are on somebody else. That person has to come to that realization, and that should also apply reversely to Africans. So, for example, I recently came across a video on YouTube. I don't remember this guy's name. What was the question? I think he said, Will Africans accept African Americans back to Africa? Right. That's important. That's an important question.
And actually nobody has ever talked about that. Don't discuss that. Yes. It's just a kind of invitation. Come back home. But what is their position back home?
When they come back home.
Yeah.
Right. So we need to
the environment very ready to accept them for who they are and for the contribution they are ready to give to the continent. Yeah.
So we need to know what we're talking about when we say we want them to come back home. So for example, the recent year of return that happened in Ghana, people have had mixed feeling about that. I'm interested to know your opinion on that. But before I get there, before I ask you the question, there are a lot of people who have seen this as a political move. There are lots of people who have seen this as economical move, and there are people who are just like, hey, look, it's about time we come back home. What is your take on the African Americans or the people in the diaspora By the way, talking about the diaspora, we need to be careful again.
Yeah,
it's not only African Americans.
Yes, I was about to say.
Brazil, Britain, anywhere in the world.
And it's not about being born there. There are still people who are moving from Africa to other parts of the world, and they are also part of the society.
Exactly. So, what is your take on that? People are looking at it in different ways. What do you think? What is the main?
I think it's a little of all the things you said: politics, economics, and a kind of emotional connection to the continent. Regardless of what we say about people who are outside the continent, they still have that connection, that African, the sense of belonging. You have it inside you. Talk of economy, we all know the kind of revenue that Ghana got from that initiative. And also the politics side of it is you have to look good, because people will not come to your country. Ghana has always been portrayed as the most peaceful, democratic country in the sub-Saharan Africa, and a lot of countries are emulating from that. So you have the political side to it, and whoever is in government will take advantage of this. Because of us, people came to Ghana, vote for us. So it's there. Apart from that, the economy too is there, because there are a lot of people who came to Ghana and they've settled actually. And there are those who are planning to open businesses. Mm-hmm. All these are good. And it's a little of everything you said. And people are taking advantage of it. And I tell you, there are a lot of countries in Africa who wished they have started this thing, because it gave Ghana the international recognition. Yeah. And people are still coming, and people are understanding, so if we can do this in Ghana, then we can do this in South Africa or in Kenya or in other places in Africa. So yeah, that's what I can say about that.
Very good. Very good.
So, and also, you know, we can't talk about the African diaspora without talking about the economic impact they have on the development of African continent. As you know, the African Union, has declared the diaspora as the sixth region. As you know, we have the north, south, the west, east, central. So now they have been declared not long ago as the sixth region. And you know, we have more than 170 or more than 180 million people outside, African people outside the continent. And one of the things that hit me when you look at them is the remittances that they send to Africa. It's very, very important. I think the World Bank estimated in 2015 that the remittances that will come to Africa is closer to $40 billion. And to me, I think that is just the official or the ones that go in the formal way. When you look at the informal way of sending money, it could be more than that. So there's no way that you say this won't contribute to the GDP of the African countries. And actually, the remittances they contribute to, like when you take South Sudan, it contributes to more than 37% of their
that's huge. That's
GDP. Yeah.
Wow.
So it's kind of very, very important. And I think it's time for us to even give them more recognition, not just for the remittances that they are sending, but also to promote trade and foreign direct investments, create businesses and encourage entrepreneurship, and also the transfer of knowledge and skills, which I think is very, very, very important. Yeah. So what can you say about this?
So so this is Africans who are working. So most of the remittances we're talking about would be Africans who traveled for greener pastures outside the continent, and trying to work hard to take care of maybe their families or their relatives back home. So if, say, a country like South Sudan relies on that for 37% of their GDP, that's something we need to know that it's serious.
Yes.
It's really, really serious. I mean, you can look at it both ways. Why would the country only rely on this and that? That's not the case here. The case here is
it's very important.
It's very important.
It's happening, and it's very important.
Exactly. So, Africans in the diaspora, which we're going to talk, which we've been talking about. So we mean people outside the continent, how they're going to affect economically the people in Africa itself. It's in so many ways. So if we take, for instance, the African American economy, right? I think they have and I don't know, I don't have figures to back myself up, but they are worth a country. They have an economy that could be an economy of an African country. Mm-hmm. And this is very important. So outside that, we also have Africans who've gone working hard and coming back to the continent, bringing whatever they've got from outside. So trying to bring all these together is so huge. I can't state the importance right now. They bring in experiences, like you said. They bring in back knowledge. They bring in entrepreneurship. Taking an example of somebody like Akon, what the guy has been doing for a long time now, it's a very clear example. Can you imagine somebody as influential as Akon coming back to create this kind of economical, or trying to create this kind of economical independence for Africans and for themselves? If we have 2 or 3 more people like this could change the face of Africa drastically. You get me? So they're very important. I mean, we need to recognize that and give it the full amount, or the necessary amount of recognition and support. Right?
Yes. The remittances to South Sudan is 34.4%, which can go up to 37%.
This is amazing.
And it's followed by Lesotho, which they have 21.3%, the Gambia 15.5%, Zimbabwe 13.5%, and it goes on and on and on.
Wow.
Yeah.
You can imagine how important these people outside the continent are being if they take a chunk of the GDP of the country.
Yes.
Yeah, we need to recognize this and not necessarily say take advantage is a bad word. I think we need to find a way to help each other. I think in that way.
Nigeria too was the highest recipient of remittances in 2019 with $23.8 billion.
You can imagine.
Followed by Ghana 3.5 billion, Kenya 2.8 billion, Senegal 2.5 billion, and DR Congo 1.8 billion, and it goes on and on and on.
Very, very important, man. It's really, really important.
But do you think with all these, the environment, the government are giving them the space in Africa to operate as people who have the experience? They live in the developed country, as we put it in inverted quotes. They have the experience, but still Africa is suffering. What is happening? Why don't we see them? For instance, we take example of you and me. We've been here for a very long time. We are finding it, to be honest, we are finding it difficult to find anything that will encourage us to go back home. There are no systems, or there are no plans or initiatives that are there to help us go back, help our own country, which we truly want to do it.
I think it's a bit of the government, and it's a bit of us too, to be honest. The government and with the government trying to, you mean create incentives or create things that would attract people to come back
home?
In my opinion, there are foundations that are being set for such connection, for coming back. So, for example, if I take countries like Rwanda, even Ghana, to a lot of extent, even Kenya, for example, these countries are prime examples of the fact that Africans can make things of themselves if they come back together. So, for example, Kenya is probably, when it comes to technology or this software, this IT department, Kenya is one of the top African countries. And this is not necessarily the government. So expecting the government to do something for us to come back is a long stretch, and we might wait forever. That would never happen. So we will have to.
The reason why I'm saying that is when you take countries like China, Japan, Korea, India, and a lot of them, they were able to amass this potential from the people in the diaspora, and they were able to provide technical assistance and financial support for their countries to create the enabling environment for the mainstreaming diaspora contribution in development frameworks. And this leads to economic development as well. And you know, in Africa, I quite remember Akon was saying, like, when he went to Africa for the first time, he met with some African leaders and presidents. When he talked about is it electricity, a lot of the advice he got was from the top people. They were telling him to just concentrate on the solar energy, because what he is asking, the normal electricity, could cause wars.
It could cause wars.
Yes. So the gentleman had to focus on the solar energy.
That is interesting.
You understand? So it seems like there is these powerful people somewhere who are making sure that the contribution that will come from the diaspora will not reach the people back home. That's why I think the government are playing important role. For instance, if you take President of Rwanda, Paul Kagame, he was able to stamp his authority. He invites who he wants. He allows who he wants with all his good and bad. And he was able to make some important, very, very important decision for his own country. That's why I was talking about the...
So like I said, waiting for African presidents to change their policies, to create opportunities is something, if we sit back, we can wait for it forever and it will never come. So we have to take a different approach. We have bright minds, man. I have met African in the diaspora who are in positions you would be shocked to see. You can find, just taking an example of people around us, some of the top hospitals in Ankara here, you can find Africans who are top doctors, right? These are people who have the capabilities and abilities to go back and transform the continent. We do not need the government to say, hey, look, this is this is that, this is... They don't care. But the thing is, yes, are we going to face struggles when we go back and try to create something? 100%. But some people...
There should be alternative way of doing things.
Exactly.
And it doesn't necessarily need the government to be part of part of it.
We are the government in a lot of sense. And some people need to suffer for some people to benefit. That's like the unfortunate equation of life. That has to be there. You can't accept. So if we look at the Europeans, for example, they're developed, but long time ago, people suffer. They suffered. Taking, for example, the 15th century in Europe. These people were in difficult situations. But looking at them today, they're probably the standard of the world. So we going back with our expertise and experiences. People like you and I, people from the other places in the diaspora, going back and creating a sense of community, one, and trying to create these entrepreneurship opportunities, trying to educate people on how to do all these to benefit the economy. I think we can do it without actually having the government incentivize.
Yes, when you talk of distractions and suffering, some have to suffer for us to reach what we want to get. I remember in their book, Why Nations Fail, they coined a phrase like creative distraction. Some people are enjoying from the existing system. So when you come to make things right, they are going to lose what they are getting. It's always going to be a problem. But it's always for you to talk about development, you have to cause some kind of distraction to some other people.
Definitely. And the thing is, when you go to places, so for example, if you go to a much more developed country, there's little you can offer, right? I mean, what else do you need to bring to create opportunity? You need to think of things which haven't been done before. But if you get these simple ideas and go back to our countries in Africa, simple things are yet to be done. And this is also an opportunity for us to think, hey, look, I might not be the new Steve Jobs. I might not be Mark Zuckerberg, right? But I can have the same impact or a similar impact back in Africa by creating just simple, important, necessary things for the continent or for the country. You get what I mean? So
yes, and I actually agree. I agree with you 100%. Like what we see on TVs and social media, you see, there are a lot of people in Africa who can do so many things, but 100%. We always want to go big.
Yes,
and that alone kind of hobbled us, and it's discouraged us from doing anything, because if you start something big and you fail, does it?
Yes.
You understand? So I kind of agree with you. This is a very broad topic. The conversations will continue, and I think in some other time to bring people to talk about these things. Let's look at this very, very quickly. Like, what are some of the ways that, or some of the things that we can do to encourage people
in the diaspora
who are living in the diaspora to make the necessary contribution we need towards the development of the African people? Not physically, they can also do it virtually. You don't have to be physically in Africa to contribute. You can do it wherever you are. So what are some of the things you think, and we wrap up on that?
Yeah, so some of the things we can do, unfortunately, we have a lot of people trying their best to create a positive idea of, or a positive connection with the content, impact with the people. So governments can do things very similar to the year of return. I don't care what the thinking is behind, what the agenda is.
Yeah, let them come. Let them see the continent. Let them see the people.
Let them come so that they can see that, hey, look, we're not necessarily different, right?
No.
Them coming could create a lot of opportunities, which we've seen, economic opportunities, social opportunities for the continent. Us in the diaspora and people in Africa should just think about the progressive, how we can progress from where we are now, how we can come together with people in the United States, people in Brazil, people in this part of the world, people in Asia, to create opportunities. So take, for example, if we go back home now and I find a person who is from, I don't know, who studied in Europe and has an idea to make things better for the country. What is there to stop me from connecting to that person? Right? Trying to create all these positive contribution. This is something we need to foster on. This is something we need to foster and we need to create more of. Right? So we can have a lot of activities, but I want us to be more conscious of our interactions with others, to be more accepted, to be more accepting rather of different type of cultures that are going to be coming in the already existing African culture.
Yes. Right.
So there are a lot of things, like you said, we need to talk. We might have to do a second part of this podcast. Otherwise, we'll talk forever without actually ending or concluding this.
Yeah.
What's your view on this matter? How do you think that can work?
Yeah. I think there are different groups who are trying their very best to make sure that there is that kind of connection between people who are outside, who are living outside the continent of Africa, with the people who are living inside. And one of them is Dr. Chihumbori, I think. She has been doing a very massive work.
Oh, are you talking about the ambassador for...
Yeah, the former ambassador to
AU to the former, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, she's doing a massive work, and there are a lot of initiatives that they are doing to make sure that they don't just bring them together, but they bring the resources that they have as Africans outside so that they can invest in the continent. And I have always been thinking that, and I'm an avid believer that the Africans in the diaspora have a very, very, very big role to play towards the development of Africa. It's just about space, and then for them to be able to intelligently take their place where they are supposed to be. Imagine if China can sponsor the African Union, say 50 billion, and just the remittances that is coming into the African country, which is official, is just 40 billion.
Yeah.
And imagine if we have like 2,000, 10,000 Africans in the diaspora who can contribute. Can't we give this money instead of going to China?
Absolutely.
So I think they can do it, or we can do it, because we are also part of it. But we need that organization. We need that leadership to be able to take advantage or benefit from what is happening outside the continent.
Yeah, I think it's emerging, fortunately, and luckily we are having positive results. Right, there are a lot of examples we can go. So I think we need to look at the positive sides of these things that are happening, these ideas that are coming into the continent with the likes of Akon and other people in the diaspora. We just need to find a way. We just need to find the right channel. Right, we just need to find the right channel. I think that's the proper word.
Exactly.
To foster these these amazing ideas that we have, this great initiative that have been happening throughout the continent. This is something we need to look very, very deeply. I do believe that so much.
Yes, I think we've done our best regarding this topic. Thank you very much, Hafiz, for your immense contribution. Thank you very much for listening to us. We hope to see you again in our next episode.
Yeah.
The conversation will continue, and have a blessed day.
Thank you, everybody, for listening. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the African Experience Podcast. For show notes, visit us on www.theaexppodcast.com and follow us on social media at the AEXP Podcast.